everyone. Welcome to She Knows Arsenal. We have another show for you today. You guys are probably watching this on Friday at some point during the day. It's early for me. It's very early for me, and I think it's also early for James. James is my guest for today. But on today's show, we're going to be talking about the attack, which is something that we talk about every single day at She Knows Arsenal. Literally every single show is about why don't we look the same? Why are we not free flowing? Why aren't the goals like all of this? And so we're gonna chit chat about it. And ahead of Sheffield, a game where we kind of expect to score some goals, I just wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive and just to give you guys some background. So far in the Premier League, Arsenal sits second, obviously. Or we're second or third. We're second or third. We're second. Yeah, we're second.
Third, I think.
Third.
Are we second?
We're second.
Oh, we're third. I think we're level on points with City.
Yes, we're third. We have scored the seventh most goals with 18 and have created 11 big chances, which is down near Palace and Nottingham Forest when it comes to big chances created. So that's where a lot of these, I think, conversations are stemming from. Arsenal have scored quite a few penalties. I think we have 5 so far this season, which is amazing. But you obviously want to score goals from open play. And we've also scored some goals from set pieces. If you guys remember, fantastic goal scored by Trossard against Everton was a set piece. So there's some positives there, but there's definitely some things to think about. And so I wanted to pick James's brain. He's already told me ahead of time, you guys, that he doesn't know. So we're just both going to be just trying to figure this out together of why we're not scoring enough goals. But I guess my first question for you, James, is just in general, like big picture for Arsenal, like, do you think we're just a different team than last season in terms of our, goal scoring, or are we worse?
I loved last season's team. I loved them. I love the way they play football. I love the way they cut through teams. I loved our attacking shape with Partey and Zinchenko sitting, and then Xhaka having this box-to-box role, crashing the back post, Erdegaard created, knitting things together. I love last year's team. So I want to believe that we've made tweaks that are still being implemented by the team and that we will eventually get to something that looks more like last season. What I will say is that I think Arteta is flirting with the idea of going back to something that looks more like last year because he seemed so wedded to Declan Rice as a 6. Declan Rice will be my sitting player. That is how we're going to play. And then actually 3 games in a row, we've now seen Declan Rice in this box-to-box, more driving runs kind of role, which I've really liked and I've always wanted to see it. The thing is, Partey hasn't been available, so we actually don't know how successful that midfield can really be because he's played alongside Jorginho. Now, let me say, I like Jorginho. I actually think he's done well for us, apart from the Tottenham mistake. I think if he didn't have that error, I think all Arsenal fans would very happily say, for 12 million, he's more than done a job for us. But you want to see that combination with Partey in there. So are we a different team to last year? There's definitely something about us that feels like with every attack, we're worried about what happens if it goes wrong and the other team go the other way. And last year, everyone talks about the Bournemouth game, 2-0 down, but we turned it around. The Southampton game. There were other games, like Everton at home, where we slapped them 4-0. But before getting the goal, Everton had 2-3 really good chances in that game. And there were moments in that second half of the season where we were really caught in transition often. We really looked vulnerable when we attacked, which is like not what really good sides should look like. And luckily we have 2 absolute monsters at the back in Saliba and Gabriel who can cover that space with their pace, with their aggression, with their intelligence, to bail us out often. But that's not sustainable. I mean, listen, we saw it wasn't sustainable. Now, when Rob Holding came in, I do believe if Saliba or Tommy has to have been fit, profile-wise, apart from that, Rob Holding wasn't good enough. Profile-wise, he wasn't good enough to play the way our defence was meant to play compared to the others. But I actually think we could have probably still played that brand of football and still got over the line, even if we were vulnerable in transition. But it does feel like that is what Arteta's trying to address and put a safety net around more. I think he's very. If you hear what Arteta has said in some interviews since last season's, losing of the title, I think he's very scarred by the way it went wrong. And I think he's just like maybe overdoing it to address that.
Yeah, maybe he's scared.
I think he might be. Do you get that impression? Do you get that impression that he's so disappointed? Because we were 8 points clear, and I think in his head, 8 points clear with the fact we were playing them once, so we actually had the opportunity to slow them down ourselves. I think he just thinks that was unacceptable. Where a lot of us think it's not good enough, but appreciate that, you know what, we were still a young team and experienced, and City were on a mad run, they won a treble. I don't think Arteta thinks of it that way, which is kind of great in one sense. That's standards, as people always tell me. But there's a chance he overthinks it. I don't know.
I think but I think he understands. Like, he understands the opportunity that was last season. Because it was a massive opportunity. He will know better than anybody the machine that is Manchester City. So if they're off by 2% and that gives you an 8-point gap going into the run-in, and you don't get it over the line, that will scar you, I think. You know, that the conversation around Mikel Arteta is completely different if you win the Premier League in your third year. It just is, you know, so I can understand that. And he's trying to troubleshoot and trying to understand why those things happen and prevent them from happening again. But I do think that, you know, I don't really remember Liverpool or Manchester City when they were really battling for the title having the handbrake on. I don't really remember that. I think they've had really good defensive structures, great 1v1 defenders, guys that can bail them out, really top quality goalkeepers. But I'm not sure that I've ever seen them play with such, like, they go out there and they go and they attack you. And I feel like we're a little bit afraid to do that. And looking at the numbers from last season, like, this actually surprised me a little bit too. Like, our big chances created last season, we were 6th. Mind you, we came 2nd. And the two teams that sat highest in big chances created were Liverpool and Manchester City. And they were both over 100. They were both at 103 big chances created. We were at 73. And we scored 88 goals, I think, in the Premier League. So I feel like what that says to me is our attack was good. It could have been better if we want to get to the point of, like, attacking the way Manchester City and Liverpool do. But almost everything was flying in the back of the net last season.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah. You know, confidence and momentum is I don't know. It's it's like a drug to these players, because it's like, wow, I just did that. Oh, I'll do it again next weekend. Like, it's like the feel-good factor. Last season was incredibly unique for Arsenal and these Arsenal players and the fans, because we challenged for a title and we didn't think we would. And we rode the wave, we had the momentum. And people forget, we didn't just challenge for the title. We had 50 points after 19 games. We went half a season at Centurion's pace. Like, it was phenomenal. And yeah, City themselves haven't put up Centurion's pace since. So that's very difficult to do. Even if they have got to 90 something ridiculous points again since, whatever, that's just how good they are. But, you know, for half the season, we were unreal, you know, beating Liverpool, beating Tottenham, scoring 3 against both. We lost at Old Trafford, we played brilliantly. We went to Brighton, a really good side, we slapped 4 past them. You know, we did some really good things. And it felt like everything was flying to the back of the net. I look at goals like, this is an obscure example. Do you remember the 5-0 win against Forest? Do you remember that Saka, the opening goal? I was at that game. Saka, kind of similar to the Chelsea goal. He opens his body at the sort of edge of the penalty area, whips it into Martinelli, who gets his head on it.
Here's Saka. Early ball in. What a wonderful header!
And nods it in at the near post. I remember thinking, that looks a simple goal, but it's really not. Like, the way Martinelli's had a run and attacked that ball and got his head on it and managed to put it in that part of the goal, it was an unbelievably efficient goal. And I felt like we were doing a lot of that. We were scoring loads of really efficient goals, where Martinelli against West Ham slapping it at the near post. Like, there was just, things were coming off for these players. And that makes it sound like it was luck. It wasn't luck. It was brilliant. Like, they were riding this wave. It was phenomenal. Odegaard had 15 non-penalty goals or something. Like, that's extraordinary. Everyone was kind of just feeling. And this season, Like, I do think that kind of is always going to even out a little bit. And towards the end of last season, maybe it started to. So this season, I think Arteta might be knowing that and just thinking, if we're not going to be as efficient going forward, let's at least have a better base at the back. So when I look at this team right now, compared to if I take what we did so well last season that I haven't seen this season, first thing is Jesus up top week in, week out. And I really think he needs to listen. The Sevilla game shows you everything. Look at the way he scores his goal but coming off the left. Look at the way he drops in and Martinelli attacks that space. We haven't been able to do that all season. The Chelsea game was our first opportunity at Stamford Bridge. Is difficult to do, right? Zinchenko finding Xhaka in those pockets, very difficult. I felt the best we've looked all season this year at picking out players in the pockets was Tomiyasu moving into the 8. It's incredible. It's Tomiyasu going, yeah, fine, I'll be the box to box you need.
Yeah.
And actually, that's not credit to Arteta for that, because that is something he seems to have worked on as well tactically, getting Tomiyasu forward from those areas. So there are things about the way we lined up last season. Some of those combinations, the right-hand side, White, Partey, Odegaard, Saka, but we haven't seen Partey start as a 6 at all this season. Those things might be key parts as to why we're not finding that fluidity. I also think a big part is you can't tear apart your midfield and then expect everything to work again in the same way. Partey and Xhaka were starting week in, week out with Odegaard. Now it's Rice and Vieira, or Rice and Havertz, or Jorginho and Rice. And that is going to have an impact too. So I think there are lots of little clues, but what the one thing is, I don't know, because ultimately none of it matters. If Mikel goes, ultimately I've just got the handbrake on right now.
Yeah, no, I hear you touch on so many good points. Like, I think before the Chelsea game, our favorite front three had only played together for 14 minutes all season. That was a very consistent partnership or trio. I know that, Jesus was out for a significant amount of time, but that first half of the season that you spoke about, they played together every single game. And so not having that, I do think, has affected us in the connections, especially on the left. Martinelli and Jesus against Sevilla came to life. It was exactly what you expect from the two of them. They have like this weird connection where they just know where each other's going to be. They always look for each other. They make the left-hand side tick. And so we haven't had that. And I think that hasn't been taken into consideration. I know that people are like, well, you have a squad, so your squad should just be able to. No, no. You need certain players to balance each other out. Jesus
Absolutely.
and Martinelli definitely do that. And we'll definitely talk about the connection between Odegaard and Partey, because I do think that that's being maybe underlooked. Wait, what's the word? Overlooked. I was like, overlooked. Duh.
Yeah.
What am I saying? So yeah, I wanted to speak to you about Jesus. Looked full of confidence. He's a player that gets spoken about quite a bit. When we start talking about scoring goals, the initial reaction is we're never going to win anything with this guy up front. And I thought Thierry Henry made a very good point about Gabriel Jesus after the Sevilla game, is that he's a player that he'd really love to play with because he's a great teammate and he works really hard. But sometimes as a striker, you need to think less and only be focusing on scoring and not on all the other bits of the game. And we know Jesus is very busy. He works very hard for Arsenal. He comes deep. He wins tackles. Sometimes he's off on the left, right, whatever. Do you think that we disrespect Jesus a little bit and don't take into consideration all the work that he does that takes him away from his sole focus in scoring goals, and he does that for the team?
I mean, there's disrespecting Jesus, but I think there's been like a disrespect to everything Klopp and Guardiola have taught us over the last 5 years. These are two managers who've been winning titles with Firmino leading the line, who's never been, a 25 goal a season gunman. Phil Foden false 9, or Bernardo, or De Bruyne, or whatever. Those years between Aguero and Haaland, when Jesus was available, Pep would play him out on the right sometimes. We've been taught that these guys can get to the very top and can get to those, those Premier League record-beating point tallies, with false 9s. So I don't. Okay, the Centurions had Aguero, but my point is, I'm really surprised by the discussion around Jesus. What I am totally here for and agree, and I fly the flag with everyone, is maybe a different profile striker, a different option, maybe someone who is a little bit more penalty box focused, but in a different way, which is why I love the Ivan Toney option, because he gets goals, he's shown he can score goals, but he's also a fantastic target man. And I actually think he can bring players into play in a different way. Jesus can almost go, wing to wing, drop in. He can cover a large area in the way he brings everyone in. Tony might bring players in, but from a much more static area of the pitch, kind of, I'll be a target man, I'll pin centre-backs, play off me. I actually think an Ødegaard would really benefit from something like that. But on Jesus, we have seen that clubs can win titles without a 30-goal a season striker, but they have to have other 20-goal a season players. But I think we've got that. Saka and Martinelli coming out with that. Trossard scores goals. Ødegaard has shown he can get goal tallies. So if you accept that we can win the title, or that clubs have won titles without having a number 9 that scores a load of goals, then what else does Jesus then have to do for us to believe we can win the title with him? Because his ability off the ball is unreal. His ability outside the area is as good as anyone's. I mean, who is out there doing from a false 9 or whatever you want to call it position? Who else is doing what Jesus does? Like, I really find the discussion around him, and that's why I want to be clear. The discussion around whether we need another option to complement, I'm here for. I agree with it. I'm so on it. But on whether we can win the league with a fully fit Jesus all season, doing what he does like he did against Sevilla, I actually am surprised it's even a question. Of course we can do it. I think the question is more, can young Martinelli and Saka, who I love and are fantastic, maintain those levels over multiple years? That is the only way you then get the best out of Jesus again. But yeah, I think the discussion around Jesus is harsh, personally.
Yeah, no, like Jesus is a player that I rate very highly, like very, very, very highly. I always wanted him at Arsenal. And when he was kind of sitting on the bench at Manchester City, I was like, man, we really should be looking at this player. Like, he's not getting any playing time. He's so good. And, I love a false 9 too. So I think it's perfectly possible, as somebody that really enjoyed watching Firmino, Mane, and Salah. It's definitely possible if you have goal scoring wingers. Like, it's 100% possible. And there's not that many false 9s that are better than Gabriel Jesus, like you said. I think it's just his fitness. That's definitely something that's creeping into the back of my mind.
That is a concern. That is, I'll be honest.
Because you can't rely upon him. If you can't rely upon him, then you need somebody in the team that can do the things that he can do. And right now, I look at the options that we have there, and like Trossard, Havertz, and Nketiah, and say they all have strengths and things that they can add into that position, but nobody can do what Jesus did against Sevilla. Is something that I don't think maybe Trossard can do it, but that's just confidence and skill, and like, I don't know if they can do it. So it's definitely something to think about. But yeah, I agree with you. Jesus is somebody that we can definitely win things with, but if he's not going to be fit, then we have to figure out something else.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you. I've got a slightly different concern though on this front, which is with that front 3. I think they are good enough, but what worries me a little bit with Arteta sometimes is, okay, let me give you an example. So we talked about how that front 3 can work. Jesus drops in, Saka, Martinelli can attack the space. So let's say all 3 aren't available, and he is putting another 3 out there. Nelson on the right, Nketiah up top, and Trossard on the left is probably what it would look like, because I think he sees Havertz as more of a midfielder. So if that's the 3 he goes with, he's putting Nketiah up top and Trossard on the left. But I think that the way to more accurately recreate that is Trossard in the false 9 and Eddie off the left. And I'm not saying Eddie's a great left-sided player by any means, but he's at least got that kind of more darting pace out on the left, like a Martinelli might have, than Trossard. Again, he's not that player, but I'm saying he probably has it more than a Trossard, and Trossard is certainly more of a false 9. But the problem is we have this depth, and I love the depth we have in Arsenal. For the first time, I'm like, wow, genuinely, you could build a lot of great 11s. If Trossard comes in, I don't mind. If whoever, Jorginho plays, I don't mind. If it's Tomiyasu playing, I don't mind. But the thing we've got is, actually, for all that depth, not a lot of players in the squad are Martinelli's or Saka's or even lookalikes. Maybe Reece Nelson on the left can play the way Martinelli plays on the left, but that's kind of the closest to it. Trossard could maybe play as a false nine, but Arteta this season seems a little reluctant to do that. He seems to want Trossard either out on the left or more, even in the midfield position. So that's where I do think, I really do entertain this discussion about another striker, because if you are going to have depth, but they offer different things themselves, then you've got to have a striker that offers something very different as well. But I think when that front three is at their best, fully fit, available, look, maybe it's hyperbole, maybe I'm overdoing it. Probably am, I'm an Arsenal fan. But that front three, I wouldn't trade for many front threes. It's early in the morning. I'm not off the top of my head going to rattle off all the other front threes, great front threes in world football. But I think it's got everything. All three can chip in with goals. And also, this Jesus discussion, it's talked about like he scores no goals. He scores some goals. In 11 appearances this season where he's been... Because there's a few ways to frame it. Either he's only scored 4 goals this season, which, that's not great. But also, he's got 4 goals and assists. So 5 goal contributions in 11 games, so 1 every 2. But he's also been injured for the first part, so a lot of them have been appearances off the bench or off the right. Suddenly, you frame it, and that actually looks quite a bit better. Jesus will score goals. I think last season he still racked up 11 in the league, having missed 4 months. So he could easily have got to 15, 16. He scored at Anfield. You talk about scoring big game, well, he scored at Anfield. He scored at West Ham in the title run-in. So I think it's all a bit overdone, the Jesus thing. While I understand the criticism, I just stop at the get a complimentary striker who offers something different, who's also very good, if not equally as good. But you trying to find a better player that does what Jesus does, but also gets a load of goals? 150 million, please. And then we can see if we can convince them. That's kind of where I am with it.
Yeah, no, I hear that 110%, and it kind of just clicked to me in my head a little bit why we need the number 9. Like, I was already on the boat, but you kind of talking about, when we don't have our first choices, how the guys that come in don't necessarily have the same skill set, but we want to still kind of play the same way.
Yeah.
It makes me just think that, if we're going to be very wedded to the idea that it's Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka, that's how we want to play. And if those players are not there, the system is broken a little bit. You just need to get a big number 9 in there to kind of just like wipe that away. Kind of like Holland does for City. I'll be honest with you. I think when their system is not really working or they're struggling a bit, it doesn't really matter because they can figure out a way to get the ball to that guy and he'll just kick it in the back of the net. And so basically what your number 9 becomes, or the guy off of the bench that's coming in that's just a clinical number 9, is an insurance policy. So when things aren't going right, because Trossard, if you ask Trossard to do what Martinelli is doing, he's never going to be able to do it. It's not going to happen. They're not the same. So, and if Saka's not available, you don't have anybody in the team, so maybe you just need to get a number 9 in there so that it's like, okay, well, things are not really working. Kick it up to that guy. I think it's a little bit of that, because I don't think Arteta is going to really change that much. I think after so many years of having Mikel Arteta as your manager, he's very this is the way I want to play. You either fit it or you don't, or am I saying too much there?
No, I think that's true, but he's so... I'm just going to use the word. He's very weird, Arteta. I love him. But he's very difficult to understand. To a point where I wonder if he's doing it on purpose. I mean, obviously he wants to be different.
Mad genius type of energy.
Yeah.
He's one of those types. He's a genius, but he's kind of crazy. In the best way.
I'll give you... I know what you mean. Mikel, if you're watching this, we love you.
Yeah.
Okay, here's where I think it's a bit strange, right? What does Ben White do in this team right now? Well, he slots into a back 3 and build up, but when we need to overload that right hand side, he's the overlapping option to Saka. Now, in pre-season, we saw Timber come in and start to invert from right back, and then we also started to see Partey start a right back and invert from right back. So that meant that the left side needed a player who could slot into a back three, who could defend and was a robust defender, but could also overlap and go the other way because they're trying to recreate what White does on that side. I thought, wow, we finally have a role for Kieran Tierney. Oh, he's gone. Like, there's something I find very difficult to understand about Mikel, because he seems willing to flip the dynamics, but to a certain point. Like, Trossard, for me, do you remember when a few years ago we played with Ødegaard in the 10? Before he was more right of a midfield three, he was like a proper 10.
Mhm.
And Smith Rowe was on the left, and he'd come inside. And so your two 10s were Ødegaard and Smith Rowe floating in those pockets. Like, Trossard is made for that position. I don't think we've ever seen him in it. You know, and why not do that when you can have, whether it's Zinchenko, Tomiyasu, or Tierney, overlapping from the other side? And then there you go. Then you get your dream of Rice still in a sixth position. So you can still have your back three, Rice, Partey sitting, Trossard floating, and overlapping fullback. Look, maybe I'm overdoing it. The point I'm making is he doesn't seem willing to go to a certain point, Mikel, in terms of he can still have his kind of shape and build up. He can still tweak it slightly, but for whatever reason, he wants it done a very particular way. And that surprised me. I really thought we'd see more versions of this 3-2-4-1, this 3-2-5. You know, I thought we'd see him mix up in a few different ways because he's got players with so many different skill sets. But he seems quite wedded to the idea that my wingers will be touchline wingers. And sometimes he has mixed that up, to be fair. But it's like moments in game. It's not... In the City game, Trossard did come inside a little bit because he didn't want Rice to leave Jorginho's side, and I get that. But it's few and far between moments. Like, that's what I mean by he's quite difficult to understand. Every time you think you've cracked the code, you go, I see what you're trying to do here. I see where this player can fit in. You then just sort of tend to never see it. And that's where I really struggle with Mikel sometimes. Listen, he's getting all right, and it's great. I guess to a degree, you want a manager you struggle to understand to a degree, but
it's one. I completely hear you. Like, it's kind of away from the attacking conversation, but in general, I just feel like we have players in our team that have such unique skill sets that I wish we could get more out of, but because they don't really fit the mold perfectly, we use them sparingly, or when we use them, we don't get the most out of them. Because, like, if I'm playing Vieira, I'm never playing him in the 8. I'm playing him in a 10, period.
Yeah.
Like, literally a number 10 with a double pivot. That's it. So I can get the
let
best
him
out
float.
of him. But we kind of just do the 8s, you know, and he suffers a little bit, I think. Emile Smith-Rowe could be a really useful number 10 as well if he was relieved of some of those 8 duties and just was allowed to exist within the pockets. And so that's why, like, Arteta gets a lot right, but he also, like you said, sometimes I just sit there and I'm just like, but why? You know, but why? Why can't we just do this? You know, but I'm not a coach, so I don't know. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Zinni because before we get into Ødegaard, something that really stood out to me was that, and you know this already, everybody knows this, but I feel like people forget it all the time. How influential Zinchenko was for us last season was actually like, it's a good thing, but it's also like were we over reliant on this player because he was doing a lot of midfielding. He played 27 times. He completed the most passes in the opposition half. He played most passes into the final third. He had the most touches per 90 of any Arsenal player with at least 1,000 minutes. And he had 16 build-up goal involvements for Arsenal last season. This is a player that is so influential in everything that we do from a midfield perspective, build up. And people are probably like, well, we're talking about the attack. I'm like, you don't have the build up. You don't score goals. Like, these players are so important. I think like Zinchenko and Partey in a double pivot, because that's how they were playing last season, really provided such a good platform for everything that we tried to do. But Zinchenko, I don't know if you agree with this, it doesn't seem like he's as influential this season. Like, he wasn't involved in the first couple of games in the season because of his injury, I guess. And then even as he's come back in, except for like maybe Bournemouth, I feel like other teams have maybe figured out a way to keep him honest and a little bit less involved centrally. And we're losing a little bit of something there without him. Or am I just trying to like
No,
make it a
you're
thing?
right.
What do you think?
Zinni hasn't been. I thought Zinchenko last year was like really spectacular for us, like inverting and playing some of the passes he did, unlocking defenses, cutting through midfield. I think it looked really, really good. There's a reason a lot of people had him in their team of the year, as a starting left back, because people were loving watching him. And there was a lot of praise for Mikel Arteta. A lot of people forget, and I might get heat for saying this, but this whole box midfield thing, while I think Pep maybe mastered it with Stones coming to midfield, Arteta certainly never invented the inverted fullback. Like, Pep's been doing that for ages. But inverting to the point where a fullback, only one of them actually comes all the way in field to create a box, like, as far as I'm aware, Mikel was the first to do that. I don't think I saw, even Pep he'd do tucked in fullbacks, but both of them either side of a DM. So it's a slightly different look to it. This was all about getting a real box four that would like totally control and give you constant angles and movements outside of a press or a condensed midfield. And Zinchenko was brilliant in all that. Now, there's kind of three things that could easily have happened for Zinchenko in his current form. A, that you just are out of form. I think we lose this as fans sometimes, that even though they're professional footballers, they're paid a lot of money, they're playing a sport we all love. It's like any day in our lives. Sometimes you're just not as up for it. Jess, you ever do a podcast? And by the way, you're obviously brilliant. Your content's fantastic. But do you ever do a podcast and go, that wasn't my best?
Yeah.
And do you ever do a few of them and maybe go, you know what, I need to just wake up here because I'm not like I've had that, like on AFTV where I've done a tactical insight and I go, that could have been like, I know I could have dug a little bit deeper on these facts.
Yeah.
I know I could have whatever. And Zinchenko and every other footballer will have that on a footballing level. They will just have games where they go, something's not quite right in my diet, something's not quite right in my sleep, something's not quite, but whatever it is, I'm not, because it's all about percentages. All these footballers are incredibly talented. Even the worst players at bottom of the league sides are incredibly talented. So what is separating them will be the fine margins, and it might be the elite mentality, it might be that little bit of tech, whatever it might be. So we sometimes have to just acknowledge that footballers can just be out of form. The other side of it is, has he just been found out a little bit? It could be that. Or has Arteta asked him to just handbrake on a little bit? And Zinni, I need you to cover this space a little bit more than I need you to invade this one.
Back to
So it
Arteta
could be
being hurt, maybe, is understanding that they were exploiting that space. And he's like, nah, I don't want you to be so pinched over. Yeah, no, I hear that.
Well, let's put it this way. Arteta, didn't rush Zinni back because Zinni was training back in the summer. Like, he might not have been fully fit, but he was involved. We saw the training pics. So he didn't rush him back. But I think ultimately he wanted to get Gabriel back in. He felt with the invert from the right, you can have Gabriel, and I get it, fine. So he didn't rush Zinni back. But then when Zinni wasn't looking like a player who over a period of maybe 5-6 games was doing what he did last season, quite happy to bring in Tomiyasu for Sevilla. And by the way, Tomiyasu wasn't just sitting there in a back four trying to keep things tidy. He was pressing up the pitch. He was getting into 8 positions. He was inverting like anything I've ever seen. So Arteta, I think, is willing to mess around with Zinchenko's position. What I would say about Zinni, though, is, and I am a huge Declan Rice fan. I'll ask a question about whether he's world class because I think that's a discussion that I don't think it's too early to have. But what I would say is, when Partey and Zinchenko were sitting at the base, and that's why I want to see Rice in the box-to-box getting forward, when they were sitting at the base together, they were so smooth. Like, Arsenal was so smooth last season, weren't they? Just playing out the back, playing through the lines, triangles, 1-2s, a little bit of tiki-taka here and there, a little bit of Wenger ball. It was just like, we were so smooth to watch. But those players, Partey and Zinchenko, they play with that smoothness. Like, you think Partey's about to receive and pass it back to the centre-back, and bam, he's just turned the defender and opened the pitch up. Zinchenko would do the same, or you think, oh, which sideway pass is he going to pick here? And suddenly he's threaded one through the lines. He went, that wasn't on. How do you pick that out?
Yeah.
And that, I think, when players do that from build-up, I think don't underestimate how that lifts the players in front who go, oh, we're balling out here, and then it all kind of happens. So I think that's a part of it too. I do want to see that Partey, Zinchenko pivot back and Rice in the 8 at some point, because I think they were such a catalyst for the football we played last year.
Yeah, no, I hear you. There's definitely a big difference. There's a level of respect that I feel like Zinchenko and Partey demand on the ball. They command
Yeah.
it. Like, I think players just naturally back off because they know if they get too close, they'll pop it around them. And the two of them had a very good understanding. In fact, that entire midfield four of Granit Xhaka, Odegaard, Zinchenko, and Partey just kind of knew what to do. They were
Yeah, they
just kind
did.
of on it. This season, it's a little bit more disjointed, and we can understand why. I do feel like Odegaard is suffering from the imbalance in midfield. I do. I just cannot look around it. Like, I just can't ignore it. But I'm not saying that he's not out of form. I suspect there's something else here. Lack of confidence, knock, something. Because from the Community Shield to now, I said even then, like in preseason, I'm like, I don't think, like, Odegaard's doing all right, but he's really not doing the business like we know him to do. Since then, his form has gotten progressively worse to like now where we're at. But so I suspect there's something there, but I don't think we can overlook the fact that like everything around Odegaard has changed. I'm looking at like I told you before the show even started, I'm looking in the weeds. Like I'm looking at the pass maps and stuff, trying to understand like what is going on with Odegaard. Has his role changed? Is he not getting enough service? Like, what's going on? And I think not having Partey, it's not that simple, but not having a player that's going to punch it in between the lines to him early and quickly is not helping him. I also think that, like, I was looking at his heat map. He's way more on the touchline and out at the right. He's not even getting central into zone 14 at all anymore. And he's a lot higher. Like, sometimes he's almost like a second forward. Like, it's very, or a second striker. Like, it's a very weird thing right there. So I'm trying to understand, because everything that we want to do well, you guys, this season, I think hinges on whether or not we can get Odegaard back into form. As much as people are, he needs to just step up. They need to figure out some way to get this guy back on, because there's nobody that, if not him, then who? What is your temperature on the Partey Odegaard theory that Odegaard is missing a creative number 6 behind him, and he's not getting that from Rice and Jorginho right now?
Okay, so first, I think there's something to it. Like, I do think the Partey Odegaard dynamic was maybe overlooked a little last season. The right hand side was always talked about, Saka, White included. But what Partey did to facilitate all that, because I'd argue all three of them on that right hand side haven't hit last season's form. Ben White has been solid, more than solid, but not last season's Ben White. Saka has had his moments, but not last season's Saka, and Odegaard too. So is Partey the answer to all of that? But what I would say is, I almost don't want to make that excuse for Odegaard, because I just don't think that is good long term for us, whether it's true or not. If it is true, it needs to be addressed. Like, it can't be that our most injury prone player in the squad is what unlocks our captain. I just can't. Like, that's never going to work. So fix up. You know what I said about Zinni and his his lack of form? That could just be true of Odegaard. And that's fine. This kid's been playing since he was 15, 16. He's had, pressure like you wouldn't believe on his shoulders, and he's had to play a lot of different clubs. And suddenly he's captain of Arsenal Football Club. By the age of 24, 25, he's like, been at Real Madrid, failed at Real Madrid, though that feels a bit harsh to say. Been on loan to a load of different clubs, Sociedad included, Vitesse, I believe. Now at Arsenal, now had the weight of a title race, now wearing the armband. Like, I get it. You're allowed to have moments where you're not fully at it. That's okay. But I don't want to just say, well, Partey's out the team, so I think a player of Odegaard's A, importance because he's wearing the armband, but B, quality because we know what he has. I think he should be the kind of player, and maybe some of this goes back to Arteta and what kind of license he gives him. I want to see an Ødegaard go, me drifting into this right 8 space isn't doing anything for me. I'm getting crowded out. When I do get it, Saka's already crowded out, so I'm not combining with him. Let me see if I can pick it up in the 10. Let me see if I can sit in between 2 DMs and try and cause them some headaches. Because I don't think Ødegaard's been as bad as people have said this season. I think the last few games he's been really poor, don't get me wrong. But against Man United, he was fine. I thought away at Everton, he was fantastic. When he came on against Brentford, he calmed things down. I know that was only Carabao Cup. But PSV at home, he was really good. I think Ødegaard's had his moments and been fine. I thought he started the season with the Community Shield, the Forest game. Palace away, he was great. He was great at Palace away. So Ødegaard hasn't been like stinking out the place since day one. He's kind of gradually, he's had like he's had a good, such a decent start and sort of fallen to this point where we're all slightly concerned. But part of the pressure is the fact that Maddison keeps putting in masterclass after masterclass across the road.
I've been
and
saying this. The
that's adding
Maddison
to the
effect
pressure.
is making people panic. Arsenal fans do not want to have the second or third best attacking midfielder. They don't.
But they don't.
Maddison.
But I'm not. People might hear this and think, James, you're doing too much. You're protecting your player, and I get it. Like, I would entertain that conversation. But Maddison is very much deployed as a 10. Sarr and Basuma can get forward, but they're a good double pivot. Maddison, he darts left, he darts right. Against Arsenal, it was on Bukayo Saka's side, his left side, where he darted him beyond and put it on a plate for Son. Against Luton, it was from the right side, where he puts into Van de Ven. Like that dart, that burst of pace, that ability to take players on, Ødegaard doesn't do that. And so you're going, look at that explosiveness, look at that. But he's doing it as well from a 10 position. Like, he's a more direct player and he gets into those pockets and he pops left, right, central, beyond, whatever. Ødegaard's got a very key role. Why? Because there's another 8 that gets forward. Sarr can get forward for Tottenham, but it's more dependent on where Maddison pops up. So with Ødegaard, it's much more, you make the right tick, and then Vieira, Havertz, Rice, Tomiyasu, whoever it is, made the left tick. And so that feels a little easier to nullify. You could certainly nullify one player a little bit more. But I think Arteta might look at it and go, well, if they're nullifying the right-hand side, cool, but they're not going to nullify both, so the left-hand side might be doing something. So I think he might kind of be okay with it. He might go, well, it's going to tick one side or the other. But on Ødegaard in particular, it's a lot of things, because against Chelsea, it wasn't just him not being found or him not being, him being crowded out of games or being pressed. He was also just playing terrible passes. Like, I think his shot pass selection this season has been really poor. He's been shooting when he should have passed it. He's been passing when he should have been shooting. Like, I do think, and this sounds like an attack on his character. I don't mean it to be, but I do think the amount of goals he scored last season might have got a little bit to his head. Like, I see him. Is that harsh? I know that might be a little bit harsh. I know. What I just mean is, that makes it sound like an arrogance thing. I think he is now, I don't think it's that. I think he's getting into areas where he's taking shots on that. For me, I'm like, that wasn't the right decision. But then I guess we've longed for players to shoot more, so I shouldn't be too critical. But there are moments where I'm like, I don't know if that was the right decision.
He's taking
anyway.
shots sometimes, and it's like, come on. Like, I need
you to
stop. Like, he's taking shots that Thomas Partey would
yes.
take.
Yeah.
Or you're like, why would you do that? But it's Ødegaard, so you're like, this is shocking. Like, why are you doing it? I understand what you're saying, and like, somebody had mentioned this to me as well. Like, how you spoke about James Maddison, and like, I agree with you. People think I am an Ødegaard apologist in some ways, but I think I'll say when he's not playing well, but I do like to add context, because I'm like, I genuinely don't think you guys understand that James Maddison and Bruno Fernandes just are 10s. And a lot of times Bruno Fernandes played as a forward. Like, Ødegaard is never going to play off of the right or left for Arsenal. It's just not. He has so much responsibility on his shoulders. And sometimes I do wish he could just play in the 10 so that he could just focus on creating. And it goes back to the Thierry Henry comment about Jesus, where, you know, he can't just focus on his next shot, his next opportunity, because he's being asked to defend, come deep, create, do all these things. Odegaard is pressing off the ball, captaining the side, coach on the pitch, all this kind of stuff. And I kind of just want him to pop up in between the lines and put in passes to our attackers. And I just wonder if, like, some of our players are asked to do so much and they're so good that they can do it. But sometimes you just need to simplify their role a little bit. You know, we have like 3 players like that where I think, you know what, you're doing a little too much for me. Like, I just kind of want you to like chill a little bit. And that's where I'm like, why can't we just play like a 4-2-3-1? You know, play a 4-2-3-1, probably get the best, like you said, out of Declan Rice. He can go forward, but also be next to a DM. Then you don't have to have Zinchenko like inverting. You can just have regular fullbacks or Tomiyasu back there. And then your 10s, you have 4 players that could really do damage at the number 10. Vieira, Odegaard, Kai Havertz, and Vieira. Or no, did I already say Vieira? ESR too. Maybe it's too simplistic, but I kind of just want to see Odegaard's maybe role simplified a little bit because he's doing the most, you know?
Yeah. Well, okay. Because I'm a big Arteta fan, but let me put let me try and get in the minds of Arteta critics. Which I always listen to those conversations, you know. I'm not, just because I'm an Arteta fan doesn't mean I'm like, no, anti-Arteta, you know, I can't, you know. Yeah, I listen to what they have to say because it's fair. You know, some people are still not convinced and understand it. Their argument, and I hear it, is so we've got a number 9 who's not meant to score, a number 10 who's not meant to create, and a left back who's not meant to defend. Like, when you put that all together, you go, and those are, I think, the 3 positions you were alluding to just there.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you go, huh, yeah, that, like, and you do, and then you thought, well, no, like everything we just said about Jesus, he brings the forwards in, but Odegaard's not a 10, he's a right 8, Bazzini gives us overloads in midfield, and then you get to the point where it's not working, you go, yeah, maybe this is over-engineered, but for the last season it worked so well. So it's really hard. Someone once said, was on Twitter, and I know there's so much on Twitter that just makes you want to, you know, just delete the app forever. But sometimes, you know, some gems pop up, and someone said, if you start to look at Odegaard as an 8 rather than a 10, you start to appreciate him so differently. And I kind of thought, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And then I actually thought, if I start to look at him as more of a Thiago from Liverpool, I'm not saying as good as Thiago before people go in on me, but like a creative player who's got that creative flair but does it from central midfield. Well, how often is Thiago judged for his goals and assists? Never, as far as I'm aware. No one ever talks about it. No one ever goes, yeah, but
and Odegaard has never
Thiago's
been
output this season?
prolific in that way either. When you look at his statistics, like over the years, he gets like 5 and 5, which is still not good enough. But, you know, if he gets 7 and 7, kind of like what Xhaka did, that's what you expect from like a number 8, you know?
Yeah.
At the most. Yeah.
Exactly. So Thiago, for me, has all the he's got a massive creative skill set. And if you played him 10, he'd probably do a great job at it. But because of the way he's played, either for Spain, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, now at Liverpool, he's always played in a clear 4-3-3, drifting off to one side or the other, or sometimes in the 6, and he's all been about facilitating the play. Now, if you start to look at Odegaard in that way, because why not? Yes, he presses from the front, but that's about the only time you see him central and really high up the pitch, when he presses. Otherwise, he's always level with the rest of the midfield trying to facilitate play. So if you start to judge him on the ball in the way you judge Thiago, then suddenly you start to look at him very differently and maybe appreciate him so much more for the amount of football he can generate, for his ball retention from some of the combinations he plays and all that. But he's not looked at that way, and why not? And I don't know, and maybe it's because he is still getting into lots of attacking areas. Like, he is still considered one of the front 4, even though we have played
goals last season. That skews the conversation quite a bit. You know, when you score 15 goals in a season, people start saying, well, that's who you are, you know? And I said it at the beginning of the season. I was like, please expect Odegaard's like levels to drop. There's a reason why only KDB has reached that 15 goal non-penalty goal thing, and he only reached it like once, is because for a midfielder it's very hard to reach. So don't expect it
Mm-hmm.
again. I think people feel like, okay, well, he needs to do it again. I don't think Odegaard is. I think he can play in the 10, but I think as he's maturing, he's becoming more of a midfielder, like a true midfielder. And so Arsenal need to figure out a way, if they want to play with 2 number 8s or 2 number 10s, how to, I think, account for the goals that maybe Odegaard won't get this season, and also the goals that Xhaka got. Because looking at his numbers, I was like, that's a gap. Xhaka had 6 big chances created. That's a lot, that you need to make up. He averaged like 50 something touches, where like Kai Havertz, when he was in that position, only averaged like 30. And we know he had 7 and 7. He had 7 goals and 7 assists. So if Odegaard's goals go down naturally because his role is kind of changing and he's a little bit more of a midfielder, then somewhere else in the team, that creation, those goals need to come in. And I think that may have been why Arteta was looking at Kai for that position a little bit higher, drifting in, was he was going to give us the goals and assists from somewhere in and around the box, but that hasn't really worked. And I'm not 100% convinced that, like, as good as Declan Rice is, that I'm going to say, you need to create these 6 big chances. I need you to get 7 and 7. I just don't know if that's enough. I feel like there's a gap there.
So
What do you think?
Rice at West Ham last year was playing as more of a box to box, because they would have Souček sit a little bit more, and he did it from that left side. And that's why I thought he was the perfect Xhaka replacement. He got 4 and 4. So he got 4 goals, 4 assists for West Ham in the league last season, which I thought was a very decent return. I mean, if Xhaka's getting 7 and 7, I thought, nice. So I kind of thought he was ready made to grow into that. We haven't really seen that. And I also haven't seen a skill set, while he can do almost everything, Rice. There's a certain intricacy you need in the final third. Has he got that? I think maybe, but we haven't maybe seen that much of it.
He's a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, he's a bit more of a battering ram,
like,
isn't he?
I'm just going to bulldoze through you. Like, I'm not going to try to make it cute. I love it too.
I love it. I think Arteta, and sorry if I'm taking the conversation in a different direction, but I hope I'm answering your point, is it's fair to say, God, people must think I'm going to have it in it. People must think I have it in for Ødegaard and Arteta. I don't. I love Ødegaard, even if he shoots a lot. Arteta, I love what Arteta's done. I don't think we're that far from saying, as good as seasons we're having, as brilliant as Arteta is, I don't think we're that far from saying he's made a mess of the left 8 position. Like, when you tally up all the targets missed, I just saw Gravenberch put in a masterclass for Liverpool last night. When you see all the 8s that weren't signed, that seemed perfect for that role, and then you see the one he did sign in Kai Havertz, but then you see Vieira, who we signed for 35 million, that was left out of the squad for tactical reasons, and you're using Rice there, but you haven't seemed to have made quite your mind up on whether he's an 8 or a 6, but maybe that's game dependent, which I understand. And you're giving a new contract to Smith Rowe, but the minutes he's used in are very strange. Like, I don't see, comes on against Chelsea where I didn't think it was a game for him, but didn't come on in other games where I thought it made sense. Like, there's a real list of evidence to suggest that Mikel really doesn't know what he actually wants to do. Does he want another Xhaka? Does he want to evolve it and go more Centurions with 2 10s? What does he want to do with it? And that's a bit of a concern, because he was so sure on Xhaka, whether I agreed with it or not, for so many years. Like, Xhaka was his guy, and he evolved him into that. And I think he's got 3 options that he isn't overly convinced by any of them in that role, but he has spent the money to bring them all to the club, and big money. We're talking near 200 million on Vieira, Havertz, and Rice, and none of them fit that mold perfectly. That's quite concerning.
Yeah, no, I've spoken about this so many times. So, like, I'm hearing you, and I'm just like, I think it's a huge, to me, it's a disappointment, and it's a huge concern and a red flag for me. And the reason why is because, like, during the summer, all the reporting around this Rice Kai Havertz thing was that the 2 signings were they were locked together. You can't get Kai Havertz without getting Declan Rice. So I'm thinking, he's about to double down, triple down on Kai Havertz being this 8-10. And I was willing to go on the journey, and be patient with it. Because when you look at that player at Leverkusen, albeit like that's a very long time ago, that player can play in midfield. Now, probably on the right-hand side, but that player can play in midfield or as like a number 10. But for him not to be as convicted about that as he was with Xhaka, like you said, Xhaka played day in, day out, no matter what. We knew Xhaka was on that team sheet. For Kai Havertz to kind of be shuffled out to center forward minutes is a little like, we shouldn't have spent $65 million on a player that we weren't quite sure what we were going to do. And it's giving we're not sure what we're going to do. And we either needed to buy the striker or buy the left center mid. We've done neither. And I feel like that, I'm not trying to relieve Odegaard of the pressure of having to step up. Like, I'm not saying that. But Odegaard and Rice are two new midfield. Like, that is the midfielders that we need to be building everything around. They're 24. They have the best years ahead of them. They're both probably top 5 in their position. Like, we need to be maximizing those two. So Arteta needs to figure out what combination of midfielders is going to get the most out of your number 8 and the most out of, your DM. You have to. And I don't quite feel like we had enough conviction with Kai Havertz to make me not feel like that was a huge mistake. Now, I think the mark of a good manager is figuring out internal solutions to a problem. And you have Vieira, you have Kai, you have ESR, you have Trossard, you have Zinchenko not even really playing left back some games. Figure something out. Because I think our attack is suffering a little bit from maybe not being as great as maybe we thought last season because we were on like a little bit of a high, but also just suffering from like lack of balance, players chopping and changing, the lack of those connections.
Agreed.
And heavy emphasis on like 1 or 2 players to do quite a lot. And we're not maximizing all those positions. But I agree with you. I look at the left 8 and I'm just like, you could have just like bought anyone. Like there was so many options. You could have just bought anyone.
And so many obvious
actually
profiles.
like Kai. Like, I'm growing to like him a little bit more. But I want Arteta, you know what, honestly, James, I want to see Arteta make Kai into that player that he wants him to be. I want him to I want him to do it. Like, I want him to say, I'm going to play him day in and day out because I believe it. But for him not to be really playing there right now scares me a little bit,
Yeah. And there's a few solutions. You coach him into it. You just great coaching. You teach him to be that player. Because Xhaka didn't become this great box-to-box player the minute Arteta walked in. It took a while for him to develop into that, and maybe needed certain pieces to make it happen, like Zinni inverting and all that. My thing with Kai is I think there's a basic level that I'm struggling to see that really concerns me. Like, just a conviction behind one pass would be nice. Like, oh, you actually punched that pass to your like teammate. That's great. Everything feels a bit. It looks like confidence, but like, I mean, how many times can I make that excuse? It's just like everything feels a little bit like a trickled passed out or whatever, slightly behind. People, it's funny because I went to war with the AFTV comment section over this. People saying Kai Havertz made a big impact at Stamford Bridge. He won his headers, but they didn't really go to anyone. We just happened to keep the ball up the pitch. And maybe I'm being harsh.
And I didn't.
Right. And then the pass he played out to Saka, he was involved in build-up. He underhit that pass behind Saka. Let's call it what it is. Saka kept that alive and did what he did. Like, let's please stop overdoing the Kai Havertz protection. He is... But what I do give him credit for is he's a committed player. He actually is trying to get stuck in. He's trying to improve. Now, Vieira could well be the Odegaard backup. And great, you got 2 of them. Similar profiles can do similar things. Kai Havertz might just be another false 9 with a slightly bigger structure and build to him, and can hold up the ball and can play in a more nonchalant kind of way up front, bringing players into play, false 9, all that. Yeah. He could do that, Kai. Like there's still other potential avenues. Just if it doesn't work in the left 8 for these
Yeah.
players, and we know Rice's future is probably as a 6. It's just that we spent so much money and not really addressed it yet. That
Yeah.
seems crazy to me. But that doesn't mean I've given up on these players, like at all.
No.
At all. I think there's talent there. I don't think I'm liking Arteta's ideas yet, but I've been so wrong. I didn't think Zinchenko was coming in to be a left back, because that's the other one. Because Zinchenko playing midfield. Like if Tommy, Kivy, or Timber are all going to do the business at left back, could Zinny come into that left 8? I wanted it for so long, but I'm not so sure now, because so much of our success last season was built on actually having some real presence in midfield. Zinny's got tech. Has he got presence? I don't know. So yeah, I think this midfield, left midfield position, left 8 position could be discussed all season really, unless Rice makes it his own and Partey stays fit, which would be
I think
nuts.
that's Arteta's, like, I don't want to say it's like his only hope, but I would say that like that's probably the most developed idea that we've seen actually work, albeit once in the Community Shield. I think we've seen it once and we felt like, okay, like we can use this fine. It puts Thomas Partey in his best position. Rice is so versatile and so committed and so much of like a mentality monster that he's going to make it work. Against teams in low blocks, not sure, but we could probably just make it work. I think Arteta has to hope that Thomas Partey can find some level of fitness and, we can get those 3 guys working together. But I hear you. I think Arsenal are not a bad attacking side. Like, I think a lot of it, like a lot has been made of like the lack of vibes and stuff. And like, yeah, I do miss the vibes from last season, but I think a lot of that just came from the team being like surprised at how good they were and just like rolling with it. Now they know they're good and there's more pressure. So they're a little bit more like, and I think the manager is as well. So we're not a bad attacking side. And we saw with Jesus and Martinelli that they have that connection. But, Odegaard has to do his own to come into it. And really, Arteta just needs to find the balance in midfield. I think that's just so important. Just to end things off here, like Sheffield up at the weekend, a game, again, that we expect to score some goals. We're at home. It would be nice to get our goal differential up a little bit. We're lagging behind just a little bit. It's a good time, I think, to catch up a bit there. If Jesus doesn't start and, considering everything, like, here are 2 questions. Jesus doesn't start. What do you want to see up front? Taking in consideration, like we have West Ham coming up, difficult game, Newcastle coming up as well. And then in midfield, is this a game to try to get Odegaard back on track or to let him just sit out for a little bit? What do you think?
No, I think you got to keep playing Odegaard. I'd want to see Trossard, because let's try to recreate that false 9, that bringing the wingers into play as much as possible, especially as we've just seemed to have found that a little bit. Saka getting the assist at Chelsea, Martinelli getting that goal in Seville. Like, let's try and build on that. What I want to see is Trossard in there, Rice box to box. Jorginho can keep his place unless Partey is available. Then I'd play Partey. I'm happy with Tommy keeping his place at left back. He's been really good. But I think he's going to do something a bit wild, Arteta. This is just a prediction based on nothing at all. I think this weekend, I think he's going to rest Ben White, move Tomiyasu to right back, and start Zinny. Because Tommy can basically play in a back 3 build-up anyway, I think he'll think, well, West Ham away, he wants some senior players available, and there's Newcastle to come as well. And I think he'll think Ben White could maybe sit out Sheffield. So I think Tommy will move sides and keep his place because he deserves to keep a place in the team. Zinny comes in because of his ability to play through the lines and create or whatever. Then in midfield, I think he's going to revert Rice back to the 6. I think he'll think, as much of a battering ram driving, force Rice is, I think he's going to see this as an opportunity to whip out plan A at the start of the season and try get those creative 8. So Odegaard starts. Havertz or Vieira. One of them I think will start with...
Vieira exists? I swear this guy just disappears from periods of the season. He was there starting and then boom. God.
See, when when he was left out the squad for tactical reasons, I think that was for the Chelsea game. Call
That's
me crazy.
strange.
I know, but call me crazy. I actually believe that was for tactical reasons. Because when you look at the bench and the options we had, I think he just went for his more versatile players. I think he just thought, well, Havertz, I can play left 8, right 8 up front. Smith Rowe, I can play left midfield, left right 8, whatever it might be. Nelson can attack either wing. Nketiah's a striker. And then he wasn't going to sacrifice any of the defensive options. So I actually think he just made a decision and said, Fabio, I don't actually see where I might need you in this game. Which might be harsh because I prefer him to Havertz, but I kind of understand how if you need to go long, you're not bringing on Fabio Vieira.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are playing through the lines, well, Havertz and Smith Rowe you're probably going to attempt it with them anyway. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I could see how he had most skill sets covered on the bench.
Yep.
So wasn't needing Vieira. So I could see him playing Vieira in the 8 or the left 8. I could see him starting any one of Havertz, Trossard already up top, basically. But I think he's going to mess around with that defence a little bit, and I think he's going to move Rice back to the 6. Then he's going to think 1 draw, 8 defeat Sheffield United. This is the chance to see if we can make it work. But we have supported this club a very long time. I am not getting ahead of myself. I think the title of the preview on AFTV was Don't Get Complacent, Get Goals. But that feels like you have to somewhat have an element of complacency if you're going to go out there, or certainly you have to have serious confidence if you're going to go out there and put 5 past Sheffield United, which we should be good enough to do. But against Tottenham, Man City and United, they lost all 3 of those games 2-1 and made them work really hard for it. So I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they want the manager gone and no down tools.
I know.
Make it easy on us, you guys. We need it. No, I hear you. But I agree with actually I would play Trossard like you said. In center forward. Period. And then you're right. Like Rice plus 210 should be good enough, So we'll see what Arteta goes with, but hopefully this conversation, hour-long conversation has I don't know. I don't think we solved the attack, but it's up to them to solve it. We just go talk about it. Talk about it. We don't have a clue. Well, fair enough. Good.
Don't they say before you find the solution, you need to know the problem? And I don't think we found a solution, but I like to think we've addressed almost every potential problem.
Yeah. And there's quite a few. So
hopefully one of them comes out as the main and we deal with it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think we should send this to Arteta and say, we've started the research. Now you finish it.
Mikel, I hope you don't mind. We took it upon ourselves to do this bit of homework for you.
I could see Arteta chucking it into the like trash. Just
he look at me, he'd give me that death stare. You know when he's been asked a shit question in a press conference and he just stares. Like when he was told Mudryk meant the goal and he was like, meant it. Oh, okay. Credit.
That was really funny, by the way. I did laugh because I was like, if anybody's going to score against us, it's going to be Mudryk and it's going to be a fluke. Yeah. Painted as like a wonder goal. It's so funny. But
that's what you'd say to me if I ever offered my tactical ideas. You go, "Oh, you did this. Great. Thank you." That's what you do. So sarcastic, and I'll be like, "Thanks, Mikel."
Oh my goodness. And on that, we're going to go ahead and end the show. James, can you let everybody know like where they can find you and like a little bit about like your short podcast that you're doing? Those are pretty cool.
Oh, thank you, Jet. So yeah, okay, in short, I'm on AFTV talking Arsenal. And basically when I started my channel, which is just my name, James B, on YouTube, I wanted to really use it as a platform to talk about other clubs. Because I had thoughts and feelings on it and on other teams and other players. And that's, if you want my thoughts on other things football related, that's where I do a lot of it. Sometimes I'll clip up my best moments at AFTV and get them on the channel. The podcast called Football First is basically, it's what it says in the name, Football First. It's drops at 6 a.m. every Monday to Friday, 20 to 30 minutes of here's what happened in the day before, here's some news and here's some thoughts on it. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, then yeah, that's essentially the idea. But Jess, as always, thank you so much for having me on. I love our chats. They're very therapeutic. We break a lot down. And I like to think I leave with more answers than questions, but this is Arsenal and Mikel Arteta we're talking about, so they don't always make it easy.
Exactly.
But I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. You guys, you know where to find James, but if you need more direction, there's going to be stuff in the description box for you guys to follow him and his podcast and all that kind of stuff. And get in the comments and let me know how you guys felt about this conversation. What do you think is the main issue in terms of Arsenal's attack? Are we just talking about nothing and we don't have an issue in attack? That could be, it as well. But let us know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Player ratings after Sheffield. That's the next time you guys will see me. Bye, guys.